Professor Basu has been working for many years as the professor at the Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University. He has also taught many of us as students who are working here at SNU. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you, sir. And I would ask you to take your place on the podium. Please, big round of applause. Thank you. And last but not the least, we have Dr. Siddhartha Dasgupta, who is an associate professor at the Department of Political Science, Seth Anandaram Jaipuria College. He has also held various faculty positions at Rabindra Bharati University and Kalyani University, and his areas of interest include society and politics in South Asia, as well as international relations and bilateral relations among South Asian states, with special focus on issues of identity politics in Bangladesh. Sir, we welcome you to take your place in the podium. Now I would like to welcome our esteemed Dean of the School of Social Sciences, Dr. Surajit Mukhopadhyay, who is going to be chairing and moderating this discussion today. Sir, if you can please take your place in the podium, and a big round of applause for sir as well. Also, a huge vote of thanks to our Vice-Chancellor, the Honourable Dr. Jubajyoti Chattopadhyay, under whose guidance we work and who inspires us every day to undertake these sorts of events to really popularize the department and bring forth new discussions. Thank you, sir, for being here with us today. Now I would like to request our head of the Department of Political Science, Sister Nivedita University, Professor Shomo Shah, to come and speak a few words as the welcome address. Thank you.
Good afternoon, one and all. I'm Shomo Shah, the HOD of Political Science at Sister Nivedita University. So this is the first time we are doing an event in collaboration with the West Bengal Political Science Association. It's a huge privilege and honor that the association decided to collaborate with us, thought that we are capable enough to pull off an event of this scale. So thank you everyone, especially to Professor Apurva Mohan Mukhopadhyay and Professor Bimal Shankar Nando for helping us organize this event throughout the past few days. I welcome all the esteemed panelists whom our moderator had already introduced. Another huge round of applause for them, please. I also thank our Honourable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Dr. Jubajyoti Chattopadhyay, for always lending his supporting hand to us whenever we are trying to organize any event or any other academic issue that might arise in front of us. I also thank all our faculty members for helping me out organize this event. So this event is extremely relevant in the current scenario. So today's event basically comprises of two parts. One is the panel discussion and the other is the book launch. The book launch is by Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay. His book Itihashi Upekkito Shoroniyo Nari. He will be joining us shortly. Due to some traffic issues, he could not arrive yet, but he will be joining shortly. And then we can launch it. The book is basically about, as far as I know, about those women who have been sidelined in the course of history despite their many contributions. So Professor Bandyopadhyay has done basically an anthology of all those women, and actually considering the current situation in our state, it becomes quite relevant as well. Secondly, the panel discussion is about, as you have all heard so far, that is uprising in Bangladesh towards a new political order. So all our esteemed panelists who will be speaking on that issue will be able to enlighten us on the course of why did suddenly an uprising of this scale took place, and why did Sheikh Hasina finally had to leave her position, leave the country, and the country went to the hands of a new set of political leaders, and what course of action might those political leaders take us to. So without sparing any more words, I end this welcome address of mine, and I'll request the moderator to take over, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shaha, for this inaugural welcome address. Now I would like to move on to the felicitation process. The esteemed members of the West Bengal Political Science Association, the President and the General Secretary who are with us, we are honored by your presence, and we would like to felicitate you from our VC, our Dean, and our head of the department. So if you can please come to the podium and give a few introductory remarks as well. So I would like to welcome Mr. Apurbo.
So I request Professor Apurbo Mohan Mukhopadhyay to come up to the stage for the purpose of the felicitation, and also Professor Bimal Shankar Nanda.
Next, I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists for their felicitation, Dr. Samir Kumar Das, Dr. Partha Pratim Basu, and Dr. Siddhartha Dasgupta. If you can come to the center of the stage, please. Thank you.
ঠিক আছে উনি বাইরে আছে
Next, I would like to ask Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay to come to the podium for the felicitation process and also talk about the launch of his book, Itihashe Upekkito Shoroniyo Nari. He's here.
So once we move on to the book launch session, then we will carry on with the felicitations. We are moving on to the panel discussion directly.
So with that, the introductory session is done, and now we would like to get into the main session, and we would ask our Dean, Professor Surojit Mukhopadhyay, to initiate the discussion after a brief introductory note. So I hope all of you will enjoy the session here today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, Professor Somit Das, Professor Partha, Basu, Professor Dr. Dasgupta, esteemed guests from the Political Science Association, Professor Ashok Ranjan Thakur, our dear mentor and senior colleague, and of course Sibtosh and others who have come here from a long distance. First of all, let me welcome you on behalf of this university and of the School of Social Sciences to this panel discussion on Bangladesh and the new dispensation that has emerged after the autumn insurrection, as I say. This is of great importance because nothing of this kind. Yes. Yes. And this is something that needs our attention, because in a piece that I wrote and which was published recently in the Deccan Herald, I said that this is one of a kind which began in Tunisia and went to Egypt and now come to South Asia, which is an acephalous movement. There are apparently no political leaders. And yet there is, of course, politics, because we believe in social sciences that everything is political. So I wouldn't say that it is an apolitical movement. Of course it is political. But it doesn't have instituted leaders leading this movement. And this is something that is of great interest to us. How does and when does a movement of this kind emerge in the history of political thought? When does it emerge in the history of political situations which we now witness? What will happen is something that is only speculative. We are not here really in a position to give a definitive answer as to what is emerging from the churning that is going on. But definitely a change is going to take place, and that's very important. And we are therefore intrigued by it, so much so that we have instituted a panel of people who are very well versed with this problem, who have applied their minds to it, and we will be quite happy to hear them out. Along with this, we have a book launch, which has been referred to earlier. This book has been edited and written by Sibtosh. This has a very interesting history. In 1991, if I'm not mistaken, Professor Mohit Bhattacharya, the then Vice-Chancellor of Bardhaman University, himself a political science scholar, and my Vice-Chancellor, because I used to be faculty at Bardhaman, asked me if I would like to go over to Hooghly Mohsin College to teach a course in political sociology, taking one day off from my onerous responsibilities at the main campus. And that's how I met Sibtosh. He used to be there, I think, in the campus, and we had kept on corresponding with each other. And he came up with this book, and I thought it was a lovely idea to put down names of women who matter and whom we tend to forget. Coincidentally, this time is also a time which is quite relevant for this book to be launched, and I hope that in the due course we would be having the pleasure of reading this book, and I hope you all have the pleasure of reading this book and appreciating its content. So to go on with this, may I now request the Honourable Vice-Chancellor of SNU, Professor Dhubajyoti Chattopadhyay, to say a few words. Sir.
Very good afternoon to everybody. On the onset, I just want to thank the West Bengal Political Science Association for giving us this opportunity to have this program today. And for that, I really want to thank Professor Bimal Shankar Nando, who is the president of West Bengal Political Science Association, as well as whom we have seen that Professor Apurbo Mohan Mukhopadhyay, the secretary of West Bengal Political Science Association. Now, today, as already mentioned by Professor Surajit Mukhopadhyay, that there will be a book launch, and that book launch is on Itihashe Upekkito Sharoniyo Nari. And for that, Dr. Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay, I also really want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to launch this very important book when you are actually right now always discussing about the women's rights, women's empowerment, etc. So, Itihashe Upekkito Sharoniyo Nari, I think that it's really a very important one. I also like to thank all the panelists who are going to be here on Uprising in Bangladesh towards a new political order. Professor Dr. Samir Kumar Das, who is from the Department of Political Science, University of Calcutta, and my ex-colleague and a very good friend. Professor Partha Pratim Basu, who is Professor, Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University, and Dr. Siddhartha Dasgupta, who is Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science of Shet Anandaram Jaipuriya College. I also want to thank the other dignitaries who are present over here, and definitely our inspiration, Professor Ashok Ranjan Thakur, who always inspired us to have this type of program to be organized. Now, obviously, I must say that the faculty members of the department also worked hard to organize it, but so you also need some sort of appreciation for that. I just wanted to mention, I am just discussing with Professor Das also, that this particular West Bengal Political Science Association, it's there from 1960s. And it was formally inaugurated in Darbhanga Hall. So Calcutta University has got a very strong connection with it, and by then Chief Minister Dr. Bidhat Chandra Roy. So if we look at the starting of this particular association, it's in a very big way it started. And then we have seen that and in that particular meeting, what I could see, Professor Niyar Ranjan Roy, the eminent historian, the Dean Faculty of Arts of Calcutta University at that time, then Professor Naresh Chandra Roy, the Centenary Professor of Public Administration and Head of the Department of Political Science, Calcutta University, also present in that meeting. So that's the start of this organization, 60. After that, almost 64 years have been gone, and there are a number of things, and if we look at the trajectory path of this association, there are ups and downs in this organization. But what we can see that actually Professor Bush wanted, who is the first General Secretary, wanted to publish a journal, and at that time he was the editor also of that journal of political science, Rashtro. And that is how actually it started, and there are a lot of things happened. But if you look at another revival of this organization in 1977-78, when Professor Bush again revived this organization with the help of Professor Nirmal Chandra Basu Ray Chaudhary, Professor Mohit Bhattacharya, Professor Prashant Kumar Ghosh, and Professor Chitra Ghosh. So there are a number of ups and downs in this history of this. But what I could see that in 2007, when Professor Amritabo Banerjee became the editor of this journal, he actually took some sort of initiative to again do a number of work in this particular organization. Now in 2024, that's why I really want to thank the present working committee who are actually giving us this opportunity to have this panel discussion. Thank you, West Bengal Political Science Association. With these few words, I just want to thank everybody. Namaskar.
Now, briefly before we start our event, I would like to ask our respected Vice-Chancellor, sir, to undertake the felicitation of Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay for his book release, Itihashe Upekkito Sharoniyo Nari. Sir, if you can come to the podium, please.
স্যার আপনারা প্লিজ আসুন প্লিজ।
Now I would like to invite Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay to say a few words on the topic of his book, if sir would oblige us. Thank you very much.
Respected Honourable Vice-Chancellor, Sister Nivedita University, respected Dean School of Social Science, Sister Nivedita University, respected Sir Professor Samir Das, Calcutta University, respected Sir Professor Partha Basu, Jadavpur University, Professor Dr. Dasgupta, and renowned journalist Mr. Soumitra Dostidar, and members of the political science, and respected Sir Bimal Shankar Nanda, and respected Sir Apurbo Mohan Mukhopadhyay, and others members of the Political Science Association, and the others faculty members of the different college and university, and lastly, my beloved student of this university. I am very much thankful to to my sir, Professor Surojit Mukhopadhyay, a great scholar, also a great administrator also, who inspired me to this book. if there is anything novelty of this book, undoubtedly it's this writing about this book. I'm also thankful to Mr. Anjan Saha, proprietors of Avonil Press, Kolkata, who inspired me to write these books. Let me allow to speak about this book. Kavi Nazrul once wrote, ইতিহাসে যা কিছু চিরনবীন চিরকল্যাণকর তার অর্ধেক তার করিয়াছে নারী অর্ধেক তার নর. This is a great realization of a great poet in the 20th century. But the modern feminist, they goes beyond that, and they argues that all the creatures in the world are required systematic nursing, and the women are engaging themselves since the early stage of the human civilization. This is a great. On the other hand, the book entitled Itihashe Upekito Shoroniyo Nari is primarily concerned with the issue of the immense contribution of the women since the early stage of the human civilization. To realize their contribution, we have selected hundreds of women, make a shortlist who had performed in terms of freedom fighter movement, or in their contribution in democratic uprising movement, and even in human rights movement also, and even in innovation of science and technology of their times. To realize of the, we read in textbooks, stories and essays about the outstanding role of many women in the history, but outside the narrow scope of history, there are several eminent and women. They did not get any place in history. So this is the time to rectify this, and the book is primarily concerned with the issue to highlight the contribution on women, those are neglected in history. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to request the Secretary of the West Bengal Political Science Association, Professor Apurba Mohan Mukhopadhyay, to speak a few words about the association, without whom this event would not have happened. So thank you, sir. Big round of applause, please.
Respected Vice-Chancellor of SNU, Dr. Dhruvochody Chattopadhyay, Honourable speakers of today's program, Professor Samir Kumar, who is also my teacher, Professor Partha Basu, and Professor Siddhartha Dasgupta, dear colleagues and respected Dean, School of Social Science of SNU, Professor Surajit Mukhopadhyay, dear teachers and students of SNU. At the outset, I welcome all of you to today's program on behalf of West Bengal Political Science Association. I will say few words about the association. West Bengal Political Science Association is an academic organization for the teachers and research scholars of West Bengal for pursuing and promoting their academic interests. West Bengal Political Science Association, the main purpose of this association is to provide a forum for intellectual discourse amongst its members on theoretical and practical problems of the discipline and other related discipline on non-partisan, scientific and academically sub-objective basis. West Bengal Political Science Association was formally inaugurated in the year 1960 at Darbhanga Hall, Calcutta University, by the then Chief Minister of West Bengal, Dr. Bidhan Chandra Rai. So we have a long tradition. West Bengal Political Science Association is the oldest association of political science fraternity. West Bengal Political Science Association, we organize seminars, workshops, group discussions, webinars to discuss various issues on political theory, international relations, Indian government and politics, public administration, and so on. We publish a journal, which is a peer-reviewed journal, West Bengal Political Science Review. We have a YouTube channel, and I will request you to subscribe the channel. We upload all the programs on YouTube. Finally, I want to thank for everyone for participating in these events. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we would like to invite the President of the West Bengal Political Science Association, Mr. Bimal Shankar Nando, for a few introductory words on the association and the topic today. Thank you. Please, big round of applause.
Respected Vice-Chancellor of this university, Professor Dubojyoti Chatterjee, respected Dean, Professor Surojit Mukherjee, respected Professor Ashok Ranjan Thakur, the panelists who will discuss different issues on Bangladesh, and my dear students. It has given me immense pleasure to come to this university because for the first time I have visited this university, and I hope that in future we can organize such programs again with the help of the Department of Political Science of this university. Apurva has told you many things about our association. I can only utter a few words about Bangladesh and today's seminar or panel discussion, whatever be the nomenclature. Now, right from 5th August this year, I had to face one question. Dada, Bangladeshe ki hocche, ki hobe? What will happen in Bangladesh? What will be its impact on India? Regularly, I receive phone calls from Bangladesh. I know a few persons because I personally visited Bangladesh to join a seminar in the year 2020. And my experience was not a very good one. তখনই আমার মনে হয়েছিল something is going to happen in Bangladesh. এবং I know that almost, I don't know whether Bangladesh is a lost case or not, but Bangladesh is going to create problem in this area. Already South Asia is maybe called a hotbed of international politics. Now, I don't know how more hot it will be in future. ইতিমধ্যেই বাংলাদেশে এখন তো সবাই জানেন ইউটিউব চ্যানেলের একেবারে রমরমা. Some of the YouTubers are threatening to occupy Northeast, Seven Sisters. যে দুদিনে নাকি ওরা দখল করে নেবে নর্থ ইস্ট. এগুলো হয়. They do not know what India is and what Indian military is. এগুলো আলোচনা না করাই ভালো. বাট রবীন্দ্রনাথ একটা কথা আছে, কাঁটা যত ছোট হোক সে তো গায়ে ফোটে. তো বাংলাদেশ is not a strong country but a large border with India. Only 400 kilometer border with Myanmar, but more than 4,000 land border with India. Naturally, how Indo-Bangladesh relation will become an issue of problem, a problematic field, I don't know. This thing will go on and we have to arrange such type of seminar in future again. Probably we are arranging this seminar for the first time after Bangladesh issue surfaced. Amrai bodhoi prothom eta organize korchi. We have to do it in future again. But we have to think about Bangladesh. The politicians will think definitely, and they are thinking. But what our specialists say about it? আমার তো নিজে কোথাও মনে হচ্ছে যে হান্টিংটন কি ঠিক কথা বলে গিয়েছিলেন, whether Huntington was right when he wrote Clash of Civilizations in the year 1993 and the book was published in 1996. It's Huntington revisited. কারণ আমরা সবাই জানি শেখ হাসিনা, during the rule of Sheikh Hasina, economic development in Bangladesh took place. Originally, Bangladesh was LDC, least developed country. But during the rule of Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh became a developing country. এটা আমার কথা নয়, International Monetary Fund এটা বলেছে. But still, Sheikh Hasina had to leave the country. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was the father of the nation. But what happened to the statue of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman? It's religion or something else. Let us listen to our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your introductory remarks regarding the topic of the session today. Now, without wasting any more time, and I do realize we have wasted some time due to some technical issues, we will now move on to hearing our panelists and each of their views regarding the developments in Bangladesh. I would request the panelists to take approximately 15 to 20 minutes each to give their presentations, and then we can open the floor for further discussion and questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Professor Surajit Mukhopadhyay, incidentally, who happens to be a good friend of mine and whom I know long before he embarked on his professional career. Your Vice-Chancellor is no longer with us, but I had the opportunity of working with him. He has been one of my excellent ex-colleagues. And we had the opportunity of closely interacting when I was the Dean of Arts at Calcutta University, and he was the Pro Vice-Chancellor academic. Distinguished speakers on and off the dais, Professor Thakur, I don't know whether you remember, I was one who was called by the newly emergent university in 2011, and I had taught there for one semester. And most importantly, my dear friends and my dear colleagues, my dear students, I have to begin with a word of thanks to Sister Nivedita University for having given me the precious opportunity of sharing what I still consider as some of my unfolding thoughts. As Surajit has put it, these are some of my prefatory remarks. I will raise 3 questions, and as a humble student of political science, and I will try to answer them in the way I can. One is the baffling question of the relationship between nationalism and authoritarianism. Is there any connection between them? Is nationalism necessarily authoritarian? Or is this variety of nationalism which is demonstrated in Bangladesh authoritarian? That's my first question. I will run a few slides, but slides are not very important. And all of you know that I don't run text-dense slides. My slides are very sort of slim and slender. The second question that I want to raise is that what does this uprising mean for our understanding of democracy, the way we have understood democracy? That's my second question. And the third question is, if time permits, then of course you know that the subtitle of this seminar, which is towards a order, towards a new order, whether it actually indicates a any new order, and what kind of order is going to emerge? So these are the three crucial questions that trouble me. I'm no expert in Bangladesh, excepting that genealogically I'm rooted to East Pakistan, and I have heard lots of stories from both my parents. I had the opportunity of having served Dhaka University as a guest professor, and especially in the faculty of law, which was in the forefront of this uprising, and a few books which I have read. So this is my limited repository of knowledge about a country I'm supposed to speak on. First slide. Yes. If you look at these two pictures, the picture on your left is Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman on 7th of March 1971. You know that this is where he addressed the audience in front of him as Bhaira Amar. And his closing sentences were, Rokto jokhon diyechi aro debo, deshtake স্বাধীন করে ছাড়বো, Inshallah. So that's how he closed his about 10-minute speech. It was the call for armed struggle for the liberation of Bangladesh. On your right, you see that his statue is being brutally hammered. And in front of him, there is also an audience. And incidentally, a good part of this audience is constituted by the soldiers of Bangladesh Army. So under their supervision, you can say, and this gentleman who is hammering the head of Mujibur Rahman happens to be one of the rank holders in Bangladesh Army. So these are the two, are these two Mujibs? Or there is a connection between them? I think that there is a connection between them, because on your left there is the nationalist Mujib, and authoritarianism was implicit in the kind of nationalism that Mujibur Rahman represented, and it's for this reason that his head is being hammered. Because time is short, I will refer to two examples of this. One, all of us know that Bangladesh is called a monolingual country. In fact, the official language of Bangladesh is Bangla. On the other hand, about 2% of Bangladesh's population happens to be Adivasis. They belong to Buddhism. 14 Adivasis, mostly concentrated in Chittagong hill tracts. And amongst them you have the Chakmas, for instance, which is considered as the most dominant of all the ethnic communities. The Chakmas, all of you know, and it's a long history, so I can't go into the details of this history. So once Bangladesh became independent, Chakmas were very upbeat that their language, which is certainly not Bangla, will also be recognized by this new dispensation. So a delegation of Chakma leaders, led by the Chakma Raja, whom I had the opportunity of interviewing, Raja Devashish Roy. So they met Mujibur Rahman, and they said that what will happen to us? We want our language to be recognized by the Constitution of Bangladesh. This was when the Constitution was being made. And Mujib's response was, if I can quote Raja Devashish Roy, "Apnera sob Bangali hoye jan. So let all of you become Bangalis." And this sounded terrible to the Adivasi leaders, because they wanted their language to be recognized, and their language is still not recognized by the Constitution of Bangladesh. So there is a nationalism, so here is a nationalism which bulldozes other ethnicities, other Adivasi communities, a kind of authoritarianism in the making. The second example that comes to my mind, there are n number of examples. The second example that comes to my mind is the ban that Mujibur Rahman imposed on the functioning of all political parties, excepting one. In January 1975, a few months before he died, he actually imposed the ban, A, and B, he said that all political parties of all hues are required to merge into what he described as Bakshal. The next slide. On your right, this is the Daily Ittefaq reporting on how the ban was imposed. And also that all the political parties, all other political parties, they were required to merge into what Mujib described as one national party, and he described it as Bakshal. Bangladesh this is called Bakshal, Bangladesh Shramik Krishak Shramik Awami League. That's the acronym is Bakshal. Now, if I can rapidly run through what Bakshal was essentially all about, I would say three things. One, that anyone who wants to be a member of parliament in Bangladesh will have to belong to this political party, Bakshal. So no other political party can actually run the election. The second is that anyone who wants to be the president of Bangladesh will have to be a member of Bakshal. And the third is that the chairman of this political party, Mujibur Rahman himself, will have the power to nominate the members of Bakshal. Which means what? That power is concentrated in one, and all other voices are simply being silenced. And all in the name of the nation. Next slide. There's a mistake here, and I want you to correct it. The sin in Ganobhavan. Ganobhavan spelling is exactly the way the author has spelled it out. And this is a long quote from Mascarenhas, and you know that his famous book, Bangladesh, the Legacy of Blood. If you look at this paragraph, I'm just paraphrasing it very rapidly. What it means essentially is that Mujib in fact used to run the country like a darbar. Darbar is not the word which he used, Mascarenhas used. Darbar is in fact the word which is used by another lady, Nayantara Sehgal, while talking about the leadership in South Asia. And this cut and dried substance of this long paragraph is this, that Mujib would prefer to run the administration from his house rather than from Bangabhavan. A. B. That people would come with lots of gifts. In fact, the other day I met one of my friends who happens to be a very eminent journalist of Bangladesh, Salim Samad. And he said that if anyone comes from Bogura, the first question that Mujib would ask is, where is the cart? Bogura doi kothay? So each place is known for its delicacy, and Mujib would always expect that people would carry those delicacies as gifts to him. And whoever comes to him, he would immediately say that this will be granted. And read the last line, that he would assure everything but would betray everyone. Which means that his words are never followed up. The example that comes to my mind is the Adamji jute mill case, which is world's largest jute mill in terms of the number of workers being employed there. And I'm talking about the year 1972, when the jute mill was shut down, precisely because there was labor unrest. On the eve of Eid-uz Adha, Mujib was supposed to visit the jute mill. He came, he met the striking workers, and he assured them that this will be opened and all areas will be cleared. The next day, 3,000 workers assembled in front of the gate, hoping that they would be given the areas which were due to them, but nothing happened. 3-4 days went off like this. In fact, Mujib assured them without knowing that his treasury was completely empty. And no bureaucrat could further follow it up by way of calling him, apprehending that he would feel disturbed. In other words, this was some sort of a paternalistic kind of rule which he established in the name of democracy. This is Mascarenas. I don't have any primary source. And that's the reason why I feel that there is a connection between authoritarianism and your nationalism. And you know that in 1924 there has been a study which uses this concept of authoritarian nationalism. And it says that authoritarian nationalism is a bizarre combination of nationalism on the one hand and authoritarianism on the other, in the same person, in the same charisma. And obviously Mujibur Rahman is an excellent example. I come over to the second, and there I will I will stop there. I will skip the second and I will come over to the third. The post-transition order. What next? What is the kind of order that's being envisaged here? You just sort of flip through the slides. Next slide. No. Just, yes, keep it there. You know that these slides are not very important. But I'm just running the slides rather flippantly to make an impression. You can think of order regardless of Bangladesh. Don't think of Bangladesh right now. But you can think of order in two senses of the term. One, in the Jacobin sense of the term, and you can think of Robespierre, for instance, as its classical representative of Jacobin way of defining order. If you read, for instance, the speeches and writings of Robespierre, and I'm talking about a particular speech which Robespierre delivered in the year 1794. In 1789, French Revolution took place. So roughly 5 years later, this is the speech which he delivered. Now remember, in the same year, early in January, if I'm not wrong, I'm very bad at remembering the dates. Early in January, Robespierre in fact castigated death sentence. But a few months later, he was defending death sentence on the ground that the order that the French Revolution has promised will have to be defended. And anyone who is opposed to the order, it is our duty to simply exterminate him. And if we do not do it, then obviously we become untrue to the revolution, to to the spirit of revolution. Now, what is missing in this formulation is that you yourself decide who is opposed to the order and who is not. There is absolutely no trial on the basis of which one determines who is in favor of the spirit of French Revolution and who is opposed to it. So it all belongs to your judgment and your momentary judgment, because he is persistently insisting that you will not be allowed to leave if you are opposed to French Revolution. So this is one kind of order which is established, and you know that guillotine symbolizes this kind of order. And in Bangladesh, in fact, I would draw your attention to two sets of examples. One, for instance, the people who were the members of erstwhile Awami League are now being targeted, now being killed. And you have n number of stories of such attacks. The second is the minorities, for instance, in Bangladesh. Even by a conservative estimate, there have been 200 attacks on the minorities. Day before yesterday, a 14-year-old boy was hacked to death inside a police station because there was an irate mob waiting outside the police station, and they refused to evacuate the police station till the boy is killed. So once the news of the boy being killed was spread out to the irate mob dispersed. You have all such examples. So I would say that this is the rejuvenated Jacobin form of terror which has come back in Bangladesh in one sense. But is this the be-all and end-all? And I will refer to one where, for instance, even inside Bangladesh, there is a great debate which is going on what could the new order be like. I will refer to a young boy who is doing his PhD in the law faculty of Dhaka University. His name is Mahfuz Alam. Mahfuz Alam, in fact, has been appointed as the special advisor to the advisor of the nation. In other words, he is supposed to directly advise Muhammad Yunus. And this guy is considered as the theoretician of the Bangladesh uprising, because he is the one who actually raised the slogan of 9 demands, which eventually got funneled into one demand, Dafa Ek, Dabi Ek, Pradhan Mantrir Padotyag. So this was the final demand. And he is considered as the theoretician of this uprising. So whatever I could gather from his speeches and his writings as well, a few of them which I had happened to read, I would refer to 2 or 3 things which in a way reflect on the kind of order that is sought to be established in Bangladesh. One is, for instance, the argument that the order which is to be brought in Bangladesh cannot be specific to any particular ideology, including the ideology of BNP or including the ideology of Jamaat. And it describes it as post-ideological order. He says that it cannot be specific to one. And as an example, he says that when all the forces were fighting during those 20 to 25 days, they did not care about their differences, what divided them. They fought unitedly. And his argument is that we need to reenact. The Bengali word he used is punormonchayon. Reenact that spirit. A spirit. And we did not think of our differences. We forgot our differences. So this is a post-ideological, and this is his word, post-ideological dispensation that he talks about. And he says that, of course, Awami League will be a component of this post-ideological order, because there are hundreds and thousands of Awami Leaguers, supporters of Awami League, and you can't do without them. But then he says that we want an Awami League which will undergo a transformation. Not the kind of Awami League that is symbolized by Hasina. And he argues, for instance, in fact, he is true in a sense. All of you may have heard the name of Kader Siddiqui. Kader Siddiqui, for instance, says that Hasina and Mujibur Rahman are not the same. And we need to liberate Awami League from the clutches of the authoritarian leaders like Hasina. And he says that we just, and Mahfouz also, Mahfouz as well as Kader Siddiqui, both of them actually are arguing that we can't think of Bangladesh without the liberation war of 1971. It is impossible. And if I can quote Kader Siddiqui, he says that Bangabandhu amader pita. আমরা যদি তার পিতৃত্ব অস্বীকার করি তাহলে আমরা জারজ হয়ে যাব. These are exactly the words which he used, that we will become bastards if we disown the fathership of Mujibur Rahman. In other words, Awami League will be part of that order. That's one. But then you know that a revamped, rejuvenated Awami League in its new avatar, which is being anticipated. The second important point is that Mahfouz was asked that will Bangladesh be Islamist? And his answer is yes and no. Because he says that Bangladesh is a country which lives between two civilizations. One which he describes as Islamic civilization, and the other which he describes as Islamophobic civilization. And by Islamophobic civilization, he hasn't mentioned India, but he describes India implicitly as an Islamophobic secular country. A country which is secular, but which is driven by the maddening fear of Islam. So he says we are neither. We have to understand our uniqueness. And if we call ourselves an Islamic country, that will certainly not be the Islamic country of, let's say, Afghanistan now, because there are many Islams. These are exactly Mahfouz's words. And this boy, let me tell you, is exceptionally brilliant, is much more brilliant than his age. I think that my time is over. So I think that I should stop here. I had one more thing to say, which is that democracy is like this, that it always comes in uprising. Democracy as a political order is messy. It always shakes you. It always compels you. It disturbs you. Interrupts the order. And I think that the democratic value of this uprising can hardly be exaggerated. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
my respected fellow panelists and distinguished members of the audience. At the outset, I must thank both the West Bengal Political Science Association and the authorities of Sister Nivedita University for giving me this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. Now, as we have been advised, this is our first round of presentation. I shall try to be as brief as possible. I'll be focusing on three issues. I think all who are present here are more or less familiar with the basic facts. That were the basic issues involved in the Bangladesh uprising and the way things are moving, and the direction into which the things are moving. So in that context, I'll be focusing on three things. One, once again taking the cue from the subtitle of the seminar theme, that's towards a new political order. I like to recall that people are calling it, particularly those who have participated in the revolution, there's a second liberation of Bangladesh. So this will be the first thing that I'll want to focus on. The second thing is, I'll try to make a few tentative comments regarding the unfolding political scenario. Yes, we are very much going through the phase of revolution, but still some political trends are emerging, and I'd like to draw your attention to some of these trends. And last but not the least, I'd like to make some brief remarks about the challenges it poses to India. So, to begin with the first theme, that is whether it could be called Bangladesh's second liberation. Now, it's very interesting, paradoxical, that the first liberation of Bangladesh, 1971-72, it was led by the Army League. It was led by the chief of the Army League, Bangabandhu Mujibur Rahman. And why it's paradoxical that a second liberation, why I call it paradoxical? Because by implication, it's the second liberation is liberation from Army League rule. So that way, it completes a kind of full circle. We can look at it like that. Now, basically, I'd like to make two kinds of remarks in this connection. Professor Das has already shown in his slides the way the Mujib statues have been attacked, and we are all familiar with that. Now, we can raise a question that why? I'll suggest there could be different explanations. I'll briefly suggest three things in this connection. One, obviously, the ruler, Sheikh Hasina, whose authoritarian rule has been the primary target, oppressive, fascist, it has been described in various ways. Now, this kind of rule has been projected as a major factor behind the uprising. Now, we can argue that when we talk about Hasina's rule, we can say that this kind of autocracy, Professor Das has already mentioned this, its roots go back to Mujibur Rahman, to the early years of the 1970s, immediately after the formation of Bangladesh. So this is important to keep in mind. Secondly, many of us know perhaps that yes, Bangabandhu was still regarded as the father of the nation, and at the same time, a tussle has been going on in Bangladesh right since the mid-1970s regarding two kinds of identities of Bangladesh. One, of course, is the kind of identity championed by Bangabandhu, championed by the Awami League. That's a Bengali identity, a cultural identity. But since 1975, after the assassination of Bangabandhu, the regime that took over, the military regime, they initiated the new kind of identity, that is Bangladeshi identity. Now this Bangladeshi identity has been, many dimensions of this Bangladeshi identity could be mentioned, could be identified. But at the same time, it has a strong Islamist flavor. It had a strong Islamist flavor. So from a cultural identity, from a linguistic identity, there was a shift in the direction of an Islamist identity. And so we can argue that the kind of second liberation that is being claimed by the champions of the movement, so this is also a points in the direction of, at least for the time being, a victory of the second identity. Obviously, there was a tussle going on, as we said, that when there was rule by the BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, one kind of identity was put forward. When Hasina and her Awami League took over, the other kind of identity, the Bengali identity, foregrounded by Mujibur Rahman, was thought to be revived. But at this point, the second liberation could be associated, could be identified, could be equated with a temporary revival, a temporary rejuvenation of the second identity, the Bangladeshi identity, which has, as we said, a strong religious inclination. And in this connection, thirdly, we can argue that why Mujibur Rahman's statue was attacked. That in Islam, as we know, that statues, in fact, this kind of statues are going by Islamist precepts. They are not allowed. So this could be another dimension, this could be another explanation why the statues were attacked in particular. Of course, these statues are no ordinary statues, but at the same time, we can also conceive of this third dimension of attacking the Mujibur Rahman statues. And the other point that we would like to point out in this connection is that it is true, we know that Mujibur Rahman, Awami League rule, they made secularism a major cardinal point of the basic principles of the constitution. And we know that this secularism was dislodged from the constitution once the post-Mujib regime came into power, Ziaur Rahman and others. And we know that Sheikh Hasina, in fact, before that, we must mention that during General Ershad's rule towards the late 1980s, Bangladesh was officially called an Islamic country, an Islamic state, an Islamic republic. In 2011, after Hasina came to power in 2008-9, this idea of secularism was brought back. But very interestingly, the idea of Bangladesh as an Islamic republic was not dropped. So it's very curious that presently Bangladesh, on the one hand, it calls itself a secular republic. On the other hand, the notion of Bangladesh as an Islamic republic also remains there. So this is a contradiction, very glaring contradiction. And there are many people who have pointed this out. And Hasina and Awami League, they're intelligent enough not to understand the kind of contradiction they're getting themselves involved in. But at the same time, the point is that why they have chosen to continue with this contradiction. Because perhaps there was a kind of, despite Hasina's clamor for secularism, I am not questioning her, faith in secularism or Mujibism, Mujibbat, traced back to her father. But at the same time, there is a kind of realization perhaps that you cannot run a regime in Bangladesh without making some kind of concession, without making some kind of compromise with the forces of Islam. So this much about the first issue, that is the nature of the second liberation. The second thing that I would like to mention very briefly, some aspects of the unfolding political scenario. I'll very briefly talk about 5 trends here. First and foremost, if we must admit at the outset that these are mere trends, no clear picture emerges here, and the time is not on its side, we can say. But if we begin with the interim government headed by Professor Yunus. He very clearly argued that I am here because the students have invited me to head the government. He calls it a revolution piloted by the students. And we all know that it's true to a large extent, no doubt about that. And what about the views of the students? We can argue that, we can mention certain things, that they have talked about floating a new political party. The party is, there's a kind of in the stage of conception, but they have argued that they want to provide a kind of alternative to the duopoly enjoyed by the Awami League and Khaleda Zia's BNP. They want to introduce a third force, a forward-looking force, an alternative. And interestingly, they have talked about what kind of ideological basis this party will have. They have talked about secularism, they have talked about democracy, they have talked about free speech. So this is the first kind of trend. And they are emphasizing another interesting thing, that is, we are not going to hold the elections, and Yunus has conquered. We are not going to hold the elections until and unless certain structural reforms have been carried out. And these structural reforms, they have not been spelled out in great detail. But what they have in mind, as it appears, that they want something very broad spectrum, beginning with the election commission. But it's not confined to electoral reforms only. But they are clear that they are not going to allow the elections to be held before that, and Yunus has conquered, number one. Number two, we can, if this is one end, this is one extreme, and the other extreme, there is a possibility of revival of the Jamaat-e-Islam forces. Jamaat-e-Islam forces. Jamaat, as we know, that it's an Islamist party, a fundamentalist party, and its history goes back to the pre-partition days. And Jamaat is not confined to South Asia also. Now, what is Jamaat trying to do? Jamaat, just to say a few words, that since Jamaat has played very important role during 1971, then during the revival of democracy in Bangladesh in 1991, then Jamaat participated in a coalition government led by Khaleda Zia in 2001 to 2006. But Jamaat has never fared very well in elections. So what Jamaat is, what kind of signal is coming from Jamaat? They are trying to bring together the Islamist forces, bring together the Islamist forces. And these Islamist forces not only, they are not talking about the foot soldiers of Islam. They also want to bring together the Islamist scholars. For example, very interestingly, they have included the Hifazat-e-Islam. And why I mention this name in particular, because I've been talking about Hasina making some concessions, some compromise with the Islamist forces, and Hifazat was one force which went with Hasina, say, over the last decade. So now Jamaat is bringing together all these Islamist parties, and they want to establish an Islamist state. That's the kind of signal they are giving. Thirdly, of course, there is BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Awami League's long-term contender, long-term rival. And BNP, its first demand is that hold the elections as early as possible. Forget about a reform. First we get back to a democratic structure, then we can talk about reform. মুষ্টিমের সংস্কারে আমাদের কোনো বিশ্বাস নেই. So this is BNP. It calls for an immediate restoration of democracy in the form of electoral elections and transfer of power to elections. But two interesting points I'd like to mention in connection with BNP. One is BNP, we have just mentioned, they formed a coalition government in 2001 with Jamaat. And BNP Jamaat has broadly been, they formed a kind of opposition coalition in Bangladesh for a long time. But very recently, if you note BNP statements, they are saying that no, our coalition with Jamaat is not an ideological coalition. It's a strategic coalition. It's a strategic coalition. So they are trying to dissociate themselves somewhat from the Jamaat. এই কথাটাও বলছে যারা কোনোদিন নির্বাচনে জিতে আসতে পারেনি তারা আজকে নতুন সরকার তৈরি করবে এরকম অ্যাম্বিশন দেখাচ্ছে। So they are kind of slighting at Jamaat's proposal for building an Islamic state in Bangladesh. And the second interesting statement coming from the BNP top brass is that we are not, well, we have no objection to work with Awami League, provided they have answered answered for whatever they have done over the last 10-15 years. But we can, the option is open to highlight which part. No objection to work with Awami League, or provided they do certain things. This is BNP. The fourth is obviously, this brings us to the issue of Awami League, whether there is any possibility of Awami League making a return. Now, there is one school of thought that particularly after the way Hasina has left her country, fled her country, it's very difficult for Awami League, at least under its present leadership, Hasina and her son, whether there is any possibility of this party coming to power in any contesting elections and coming to power in any time soon. And we know that when the army immediately after the uprising took place, when they organized a meeting of the political parties, BNP was there, Jamaat was there, Awami League was not there. So that's also an indication. And as we have already noted, Professor Das has already noted, that Awami League people have been targeted by the forces who are aspiring to form the new government. And there is very little response coming from the existing Yunus government. So all this, if we try to read the writing on the wall, there is very little possibility of Awami League coming back to power. But last but not least, the fifth and final trend, role of the army in the whole business. And we remember that it was only after the army brass, the army leaders, they decided to disobey the orders of Hasina's Awami League government, that Hasina ultimately had to leave the country, even without making the last statement, the final statement, resignation statement she was planning to make. She was transported to India on an army helicopter, and for a while, we can read it in different ways, the Gana Bhavan was opened up for public intervention, as we have seen the pictures on the media. And army ultimately brought things under control, but not before this kind of show of lawlessness. And it has been argued very emphatically by Brahmachelani that this is not a spur of the moment kind of decision by the army. They have been looking for this opportunity for long, because army has remained in the background for quite a long period, since the early 90s, we can say. But they are very much interested in both profit and power. So their political ambitions are very much there. So we have to watch the moves made by the army as well. My time is running out, so I'll conclude with a few comments on the challenges posed to India. Now, the first challenge is the kind of anti-India mood, anti-India sentiment that we have been encountering in Bangladesh. Not simply post-uprising, it has been there. India out, Bharat Dur Hato campaign, these kind of things were going on for quite some time. So there are several aspects of why this happened. Of course, first was the kind of staunch solidarity the government of India, irrespective of party colors, they have showed with the Hasina regime, number one. But we can argue two other things. The kind of economic factors are also there. I can elaborate on this later on if opportunity comes. But thirdly, there was some suggestion by one of the earlier speakers that this kind of response also has a kind of civilizational dimension. So this is the first challenge India has to encounter. Secondly, we can talk about these issues are, I can just mention them, that possibility of a BNP Jamaat government, whether a BNP government or BNP Jamaat government or a Jamaat government coming to power in Bangladesh, going by past experiences, going by their connection with Pakistan in particular, or by looking at their ideological proclivities, we can say that all this was a major challenge to India and whatever India stands for. 2-3 things can be mentioned in this connection, that the Pakistan and China factor will become very important. That is, if a BNP government comes to power or a Jamaat government comes to power, obviously the ties between Bangladesh on the one hand and Pakistan and China are going to be strained. Then that also poses a kind of challenge, poses a kind of Thirdly, obviously there is a question of the minorities, the Hindu minority. Professor Yunus has definitely, they are very much they held discussion. Prime Minister Modi and Professor Yunus, they have held discussions. Yunus has gave assurances, but still the assurances fell short of expectations. Only this much can be said for the timing. And finally, India over the last 10-12 years in particular, they have made huge investments in Bangladesh. They have developed huge economic stakes in Bangladesh, from investment, finance, to connectivity projects and infrastructure projects. So the future of these projects are likely to get jeopardized. So this is the second set of challenge that India faces. And the third and final thing that I should end with, maybe on a somewhat positive, somewhat optimistic note, that yes, India needs Bangladesh, no doubt. Some will say that Bangladesh, in fact the government of India itself has acknowledged it, that Bangladesh remains the most important friend of India in the entire South Asian region for quite a few years. So Bangladesh also needs, if economic factors we have mentioned, that economics created a kind of, they acted a kind of source of grievances. They could also contribute towards Bangladesh's economic advancement, so that's important. Yes, China is there, but India has certain kinds of edges. For example, the kind of border India shares with Bangladesh, that kind of border sharing doesn't happen in case of Bangladesh and China. It has advantages, it has disadvantages. And thirdly and finally, somewhat controversial note, the last point I can make, that the role of the US, whether India can leverage the new government, whether it's a Yunus government or whether the BNP government, which has a pro-US leanings. So whether India can leverage its connections, US connections, in order to build bridges with the new political forces that is going to come to power in Bangladesh. And last but not the least, the point is that India has to rethink its relation with Awami League and Sheikh Hasina. And it must seriously try to bridge build with all stakeholders, particularly BNP and others. Now, BNP is a better bet compared to Jamaat, but these are matters of politics, these are matters of diplomacy. How we handle them, therein lies our the challenge, therein lies our success. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I express my deep gratitude for inviting me to this program, and without much ado, let's begin. So, there were 4 points basically in the brochure that what caused this sort of an explosion. I mean, an explosion, the ferocity of the explosion took us aback. We were not ready for such an explosion because governments have toppled in Bangladesh previously also, but the ferocity of the incidents, we were very much surprised. So what caused it? So First of all, Bangladesh is one of the most, perhaps the densest country in the world in terms of population. The man-to-land ratio is very unfavorable in Bangladesh. And being part of the globalized world, the problems which we are facing here, the use of AI and all those stuff, it is giving rise to tremendous unemployment. And Bangladesh always had this problem of unemployment, and it has taken gargantuan proportions in the last decade. And this has, and a very angry young population is always some sort of a tinderbox, ready to explode. Next, the democratic deficit, which Professor Das had said that sometimes in India we do some sort of a deification of Sheikh Mujib, which I think is a bit myopic. The authoritarian structure in civilian system, he showcased it during the Baksal period. And he had this attitude. I had visited the place where he was assassinated, and I have heard from on TV from Dr. Kamal Hossain, who was the first foreign minister of Bangladesh, that he said that Keda Marbo Amai, who has the ticker in Bangladesh to kill me. So he couldn't believe that somebody could assassinate him and his family. So he was a Badshah, he had a darbar actually. And this democratic deficit, which had started at that point of time, it did continue. And after Sheikh Mujib, we had this regime of General Ziaur Rahman. Ziaur Rahman also faced quite a number of coups. Those were futile coups. And then Ershad also did the same thing. And basically, BNP was created as some sort of a democratic facade in front of the military government. Jatiya Party was a democratic facade in front of a military government. So there was always this problem of democratic facade. So from 1991 onwards to 2007-8, where we had seen two Begum Jia regimes and one Awami League regime, there we had seen that democracy could not flourish as such. There were elections, but we also had seen repeated log jams. And we had, Bangladesh had to invite Sir Ninian Stephen, a leader from the Commonwealth, to solve the political logjam between Awami League and BNP. And always there has been this shadow of radical Islam which had been lurking. Now, this rehabilitation of radical Islam, it started from 1972 onwards. I mean, we have no reason to believe that Sheikh Mujib could eradicate radical Islam. In fact, many of us perhaps do not know that Sheikh Mujib had pardoned the Al-Shams, the Razakars and the Al-Badrs, and the Peace Committee, Shanti Committee. Shanti Committee, they used to work as the informers for the Pakistani army during the 71 war. And there were Al-Badrs and Al-Shams and the Razakars. So Sheikh Mujib showed clemency to all those people. Why? Because he had a problem of governance. Keeping Sheikh Mujib in front, his son Sheikh Kamal and his family members, they were indulging in massive corruption. Because Sheikh Mujib considered himself to be the emperor of Bangladesh. So it is not that everything was hunky-dory with Sheikh Mujib's regime. So anyway, he showed clemency to the rightist elements in 1972. And after that, he slowly moved towards the right. That I am not talking about the BNP, I am talking about the Awami League. He visited the OIC conference in Lahore in 1973. Government of India had asked him not to attend the OIC meet, but he did visit. And also, he overruled the education, I'm not, Kudrate Khuda Commission. Kudrate Khuda Commission, the educationist Kudrate Khuda, he had laid down certain principles to secularize education in Bangladesh. But that creates such of a brouhaha in Bangladesh that Sheikh Mujib disbanded those recommendations of Qudrat-e-Khuda Commission, and he started introducing Islamic metaphors, Islamic slogans in day-to-day life. Earlier he used to greet crowd by saying Joy Bangla. Now it was replaced by Islamic greetings, Khuda Hafiz. So slowly, these symbolic things are very important in a place like Bangladesh, because they send very important messages, because it's a homogeneous population, monolingual almost, so a simple greetings, it can also have tremendous impact there. So this rehabilitation of Islam started during Sheikh Mujib. And after Sheikh Mujib was assassinated, obviously during General Zia's regime, they were put in a very important position. Sheikh Shah Azizur Rahman, who was a member of the Pakistan Muslim League, he was made the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Before 71, he was a member of the Pakistan Muslim League. General Zia made Shah Azizur Rahman the Prime Minister. And this continued when, after 1991, when Begum Zia came to power, Humayun Khan Panni, who was a Pakistan Foreign Service officer, Humayun Khan Panni was made the Speaker of the Parliament. And most of all, Abdur Rahman Bishwas, who was elected as the president, he was a BNP candidate. Abdur Rahman Bishwas was also a part of the Pakistan bureaucracy prior to 1971. He was made the president of Bangladesh in 1991 by the BNP government. Now we see that sometimes we tend to focus more on this binary of Bangladeshi versus Bengali. But I would suggest that Islam had set up such a socio-political matrix within which they had to operate. And here I would like to state three slogans. The slogan of BNP was La ilaha illallah, dhane shishe bismillah. The slogan of Awami League was La ilaha illallah, Noukar Malik tui Allah. The slogan of Jamaat-e-Islami was Bhot dile pallaye, khushi hobe Allah. Now if we take the common factor, what is that? Allah. As such, there is nothing problematic with it. But Awami League, BNP, I mean, just by listening to the slogan, you cannot differentiate whether it's an Awami League slogan or BNP slogan or Jamaat slogan. So what I am trying to suggest that Islam had set the parameters within which, whether you are a votary of Bangladeshi nationalism or whether you are a votary of Bengali nationalism, you are bound to operate within the parameters set by Islam. And this has continued. So why I am suggesting this? Because what we are seeing today, this process has started long back. And along with this, there is this problem of some sort of a geographic fatalism which exists among sections of Bangladeshis. It is akin to the Cubans, which they felt that they are cut off from the socialist world. They are almost into the situated in the laps of USA. So they used to suffer from some sort of a geographical fatalism. So Bangladeshis, they also psychologically, they feel cut off from the Arab world. So, and being hemmed on three sides by India and Bay of Bengal, which is also dominated by India, this creates some sort of a insecurity among the Bangladeshi people. So they are never comfortable with the presence of India or the meddling of India. And added to this, whether we like it or not, among certain sections of Bangladesh population and among certain sections of the Bangladesh policymakers, India is equated to be a Hindu power. I'm telling this, I'm talking of a situation prior to 2014. So I can well imagine what has happened after 2014. So when I visited Bangladesh, I was present in Dhaka on the day Babri Masjid was demolished in India. So I could see what had happened in Dhaka, and after that I moved around and I could see what had happened actually. So we may be emotional about our roots. I am also a Bengal. So we all may be, but we need to take a very cold and dispassionate view of Bangladesh. we do not need to remind them that we have helped you all in 71, otherwise you couldn't have been liberated. No proud country would like to hear that again and again. So this is creating an animosity. And also another parallel thing happened at that point of time, the annexation of Sikkim by India in 1975. This created us thinking among the Bangladeshi policymakers that Bangladesh is next on line. India is there to devour the small states along its periphery. And there are certain expressions which are used there that Bharatiyo Choreder Nil Noksha, blueprint of Indian, and there's deep distrust about India. So, and now BNP, a votary of Bangladeshi nationalism, they have a symbiotic relationship with radical Islam. Radical Islam is something many Bangladeshis are not very comfortable with. That's why to gain acceptance in Bangladeshi society, the votaries of radical Islam have tied up with the Bangladeshis. And actually Bangladeshi identity is basically a territorial religious identity. Territorial, why? Because General Zia and Khondakar Abdul Hamid, in 1976 on 21st February at Bangla Academy, he laid down the theoretical structure of Bangladeshi identity. And he talked about territorialism in order to delink any sort of linkage that the Bangladeshi Bengali speaking Muslim may have with the Bengali speakers of West Bengal, Tripura or Assam. So, and along with this, Jamaat-e-Islami and radical Islamists, they helped BNP. And actually Bangladeshi nationalism was impregnated with religiosity by Jamaat-e-Islami and the other radicalists. And it was basically a win-win situation for BNP because it made more votes for BNP in the elections. Jamaat-e-Islami was not in a position to form government, but BNP has been there on the fringes of going to power. So Jamaat-e-Islami thought that if we cannot go to power, why not help the BNP? And through BNP we can work. In the 2001 ministry, Motiur Rahman Nizami, very top Jamaat-e-Islami leader, I think Nizami was later hanged. Nizami was the agriculture minister. And also Jamaat-e-Islami had 2 or 3 other key portfolios in that ministry. And 2001 saw massive dislocation of minority population. Before the present scenario, in 2001, we had seen massive dislocation of minority population. So what I am saying that Islam has always played a very important role. And what about Awami League? We can very well say that Awami League has also played by those rules. There has been occasions where Awami League has made alliance with Islami Oikko Jot to launch movements against the Awami League. In 1991, when democracy was introduced, in the presidential election, Badrul Alam Chowdhury, who was the Awami League candidate, Badrul Alam Chowdhury visited Ghulam Azam. Ghulam Azam is a very dreaded, what can I say? Ghulam Azam died in prison, I think. He was a Rajakar leader. So Ghulam Azam, he visited Ghulam Azam to ask for votes. Who? The Awami League presidential candidate. And according to certain studies and one book I would mention, Barkat, Togawa and Dasgupta from Sage Publications, there it has been stated that during Awami League regimes, more minority lands have been grabbed. So, Awami League sometimes uses this facade of being secular to grab the lands of the minorities. And in the, here I would again, another I would like to mention about the PDY incident. We tend to forget the PDY incident. PDY incident happened when Sheikh Hasina went to power in, I think in 2006. 16 BSF Jawans were mercilessly killed, their eyes gouged out. They were burnt alive at the Meghalaya border. Now there may be certain problems with the BSF, but it pointed to the presence of fanaticism among the lower layers of the Bangladesh army, because the Bangladesh army is oriented to fight for Islam. It is not only about the Pakistani army, because we have vestiges of Pakistani army still there in Bangladesh army. We have, maybe they have retired now, but they have been there present. So what I have looked at history, because what we are seeing today is basically some sort of a culmination of what had happened previously. And Islam was looking for basically a moment of opportunity which they were provided by the authoritarian government of Sheikh Hasina. Okay, this much I would say right now. If I get a scope, I will discuss more also.
Yeah, and just one more thing, the ones who had not registered, our registration desk have been opened again. So kindly register and collect the food coupon, and food is served right at the end of the corridor. You can take your food coupon and have the snacks and tea. Thank you so much. And also, yeah, we have also arranged for book display right outside this room. So you can have a look at that, all the participants. So yeah, that has also been arranged. So please make yourself comfortable. Thank you.
Remembered that historic speech of Hasina, which was the cause of her downfall, where she described the students as Razakars. She said that, you know, that this was the quota star that was happening at that time. Je chakri bakri ki Rajakarder natiputira pabe naki? Mukti juddher natiputira pabe na to kara pabe? You remember those words? I'm sorry I didn't translate it because much of it is in Bengali. The point is that the quota is justified because the grandchildren of the Razakars are not entitled to these quotas. That was what she said. So this was, in other words, she took a tough stand. Think of 2006. What was Buddhadev Bhattacharya? His words are in Hindi. He said that there must have been some deficit in our tapasya. That's the word he used. In our penance. He could have said that, look, we are a majority, who are you? Like his minister, Narinder Singh Tomar. He did not say that. He said that there must have been some deficiency, kuch kamti hua, hamara tapasya mein, that we failed in. These were exactly the translated words of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that we failed in convincing people of the whole country, remember, Pura Desko. And he's not talking about electoral majority, he forgot completely. And that's the reason, you know, that the fate of Hasina, the fate of Buddhadev Bhattacharya after 2006 and the fate of Prime Minister Modi. I say this because probably democracy has reached a tipping point where it cannot be defined in terms of the rule of the majority. It is much more than that. It is the rule of, and please allow me to do a little bit of theory here. It is the rule of we the people of India. Now who made the constitution? Not the elected majority, but we the people of India. Not just the voters, because voters are only a small percentage of we the people of India. And remember that in a recent paper, the paper is yet to be published, I just tried to find out that what role does the Constitution assign to we the people of India. Does this emerge only in the preamble and then disappear? And I found out that there have been I did a computer check, and I found out that this word people has taken place in our Constitution 127 times. So how are you going to redefine democracy? By the people or by the elected majority? And in two cases at least, the Constitution solidly talks about the people rather than the elected majority. In one case, look at the directive principles. It says that inequality, I'm just paraphrasing it, I cannot memorize anything. It says, for instance, that inequality means that we, the people of India, gets disintegrated. The integrity of the people of India is hurt if there is inequality. So it cannot continue. A. B. The president and the governor, both of them take oath in the name of the people of India. One people of India and another people of the respective state of India. So they are obliged to the people of India, not to the elected majority. And that's the reason which probably Hasina could not realize the importance of it. With due respect, I would say that the recently deceased chief minister also did not realize, and they had to pay dearly for it. So democracy is, I do not think that democracy is the rule of the majority. That was John Stuart Mill's perverse explanation of democracy in his representative government. Democracy is rule of the majority. And so rule of the majority, but it doesn't begin and end with the rule of the majority. It is rule of the people. And this people gets constituted in all different ways, at all different times. When Mahfouz Alam says, and let me, yes, Surajit, I will take 2-3 minutes. Now he cannot tell me no, because I know him, we are good friends. And this is a conspiracy of friends against the enemies. Now, I will refer to two, and you know that all that I have been saying is, I'm making a plea for re-theorizing democracy. In other words, wresting away democracy from the rule of the majority. And how do you do that? You are trying to theorize people. Two books that come to my mind is one, Spinoza. And Spinoza's book, Tractatus Theologico-Politicus. I think this is a book which came out in 1617. And Spinoza makes a distinction, and I will strongly recommend that you read this book. Do not get intimidated by the name of Spinoza. This is a wonderful read, where he makes a distinction between people on the one hand and then I quote Spinoza, ferocious multitude. So he says that the ferocious multitude cannot make democracy. They must be disciplined into a people like we the people of India. And once they are disciplined into a people, then they can enjoy the rights. And unless you can discipline yourselves into the people, and remember when he talks about people, he talks about one and indivisible people. That's Spinoza. On the other hand, Antonio Negri, he by his own declaration is a Marxist. He died in 2023. I can't remember when exactly this book came out, Multitude. And Antonio Negri says, you see that the people are no longer to be considered as one and indivisible. The people are fragmented. They have all different interests. And it describes the state of affairs as multitude. He doesn't use the word people, he uses the word multitude. Now the point is that how can all these fragments of the people come together? What is the glue that actually bring them together? And Negri's answer is that there has to be some sort of, he describes it as commons. In other words, that some common purpose that brings them together. So in other words, that the multitude needs to be ordered. And in that sense, the subtitle of this seminar is very important, Towards a New Order. And that's the reason why I say that how can you bring about order? You can bring about order in two ways. One, in the Hobbesian way, that you impose sovereign's will. And that probably was what Robespierre was talking about. That if you dissent, then I'm going to kill you. If you express your voice against the French Revolution, I'm going to kill you. So this is one way. And in Bangladesh also, that you see tendencies of establishing order in this way, by way of punishing, let's say, the members of the Awami League, by way of killing indiscriminately the Hindu minorities, even Adivasis, who are not Hindus, who are described by the Bangladeshis as Paharis. So that's one way of establishing order. I don't know, I'm not very sure which way Bangladesh will go. On the other hand, you have the other way of establishing order, like Mahfuz Alam. I referred to him. He says that an order can only be established through reconciliation, by way of reconciling all these multiple interests of the multitude. And unless that can be done, I'm sure Bangladesh is heading for an inevitable disaster. I think I have taken more time, but this gives me an opportunity of what I could not speak because of the ruling of Surojit. So I skipped the second part, but thank you very much. I do not think that at the moment we have the time to respond to your question, which is very legitimate question, what happens to capitalism? Only one single sentence answer to your question is that the most flexible of all economic systems is capitalism, and the most flexible of all political systems is democracy. And I sarcastically say that democracy is the alternative to democracy. Thank you.
Ronit's question was on role of elites, I suppose. So I think in Bangladesh today the tail is wagging the dog. And the tail is basically that ferocious multitude, as Sir had said. And they will set the limits as to how the elite, because they had come together only to fill up a vacuum. As a temporary measure, there are many contradictions among themselves. Splinter groups of leftists, people who were antagonized by the Hasina regime and had deep-rooted discontent, they have come together getting an opportunity. But it is only a matter of time that discords do surface. And how will they manage it, I don't know, because actually I could not say that Bangladesh has this tendency of riding roughshod over aspirations. And I would like to refer to one article by Professor Amena Mohsin in Sir's book, Professor Das's book on peace accords and peace processes, and where he had referred to that that how Sheikh Mujib had talked about marginalizing, and he also had threatened to put Bengali-speaking Muslim settlers in the Pahadia areas, in the areas of the Mros, the Chakmas, these people. And at that point of time, the elite was calling the shots, but here this unbridled mass, discontent, angry mass of people who are yet to put forward a very clear program. They are calling the shots, and there are limitations for the Yunus government. And we have already seen that certain advisors have been replaced, and most importantly, the home advisor. He was replaced within a day or two after being appointed. And it's a very fluid situation. I mean, I'm not in a position to give any answer, because I don't know whether we will see another Rwanda-Burundi scenario here. We have read about those in our university days at JU. So it seems like anybody with access to arms, through social media we are coming across so many horrendous things, unthinkable. So where there is no rule of law. So I'm not in a position to say how will the elite react or how will the elite manage the situation. Because coming together of all the constituents on the same page seems very unlikely at this point of time. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Anyone who has? Yes, sure.
Good afternoon, esteemed panelists. So my question would be to Professor Basu, but in asking Professor Basu a question, I would adapt the framework of authoritarian nationalism that was used by Professor Das early on in his lecture. And can we see or can we say that South Asia in general is moving towards an authoritarian nationalistic framework? And Professor Basu talks of challenges that Bangladesh's transition perhaps poses to India. So are there only challenges, or can we also discuss some lessons that India might draw from Bangladesh's crisis? And we might take another question.
Thank you for all the esteemed panelists for presenting their insights. It was a really illuminating discussion. My question is also to Professor Basu and also the other panelists, if they could weigh in on this. I have always been fascinated with the question of identity regarding Bangladesh, even before this uprising. We know that the Bengali identity is in many cases the foundational basis for the creation of the Bangladesh nation. Now I'd like to ask whether the panelists think that there is any contradiction between the Bengali identity and the rise of Islamic identity, and whether they can coexist together, or is it one or the other, and there will be replacement of one identity with the other. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. I begin with Devakoshu's question and then come to Shanchari, because that's a wider question, I think. As far as the face-off between the Bengali identity and Bangladeshi identity is concerned, it's a very interesting question, but something which is being raised over several decades in the context of Bangladesh. But I am not very sure whether even today we can proceed towards any definite answer. Anyway, one thing is that we have to keep in mind that there is a kind of, and I have also mentioned this in the course of my presentation, that Bangladesh was built on a kind of linguistic cultural identity, Bengali identity, and somehow it is also connected with the language movement of the late 40s, early 50s. But at another level, we can argue that if you look at the immediate background of the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971, late 1971, you'll find it was the 6-point proposal of Mujibur Rahman. In fact, it was the 6-point proposal which he put forward in the mid-1960s, 1966, perhaps to be precise, which basically focused on autonomy. And while demanding autonomy for East Pakistan, greater autonomy for East Pakistan within the framework of Pakistan as such, they basically demanded greater realization of the federal ideal. Different dimensions of federalism, political to financial. But very interestingly, the question of, first of all, there was no question of creating a free Bangladesh at that point of time. And there was hardly any question of any linguistic identity raised in this connection. And it could also be mentioned that if you look at the manifestos of Awami League in the 50s or 60s, there was hardly any talk about secularism, there was hardly any talk about any secular identity. And I was referring to this 6-point program. The first of the 6 point, it mentions creation of a federal state, a federal order within the Lahore Resolution of 1940. And we have to keep in mind that ultimately Awami League, which was originally called the Awami Muslim League, including Mujibur Rahman and his guru Shaheed Surawardi, they, in 1947, they did opt for Pakistan, which means that they did embrace the ideology of two-nation theory. So therefore, the question is that some people argue that in 1972, the Bangladesh Constitution, it declares secularism to be one of the cardinal principles. But in a matter of 3 or 4 years, in 75, immediately after Mujibur Rahman's assassination, we find that Bangladesh declares itself to be, a new kind of identity, that is Bangladeshi identity, and it was not spelled out in so many words, but as I said, that it was laced with the religious identity. There was no two ways about it. So the point is that there are some scholars who are going to question the very idea that whether Bangladesh, which prioritized its Bengali identity for the time being in 1971-72, whether it towered above the other kind of identity, Islamic identity, which goes back to the late 1940s when East Pakistan or East Bengal opted for the Pakistani identity. So therefore, I think, as I was saying, that some scholars are going to the extent of arguing that is a myth. It's a myth that Bangladesh was formulated and formed on the basis of a linguistic identity. That's an extreme position perhaps, but a question is being raised, particularly if you look at the developments over the last several decades. Because between mid-1970s and late 1980s, this Islamic identity was prioritized. But even thereafter, as I was saying, as far as Sheikh Hasina's rule was concerned, she brought back the idea of secularism, but could not drop the idea of Bangladesh as an Islamic republic, because this will not be acceptable. So therefore, this remains an open question, that whether there's a face-off, whether one is towering above the other, this still remains an open question, I think. And the second question by Shwanchari, thank you for looking at the issue in a wider perspective. But I would like to argue that this is not a development confined to South Asia, various South Asian countries. But if we look at developments globally over the last 2-3 decades, on the one hand, there was a resurgence of nationalism. And this nationalism, and we have instances closer to our state as well. It's not only Bangladesh or other South Asian states. For example, if you look at Trump is ultimately what is talking about. He is talking about a kind of US nationalism, making America great by throwing out whom? Throwing out the quote-unquote migrants. Now, America has been classically, defined as a nation of the migrants, nation constituted by the migrants. But now it has moved towards the other end. And here is the beauty of the rise of the new right, who are basically, they are thriving on this kind of an idea that whenever you're talking about migrants, and migrants, I can extend the term outsiders. Outsiders have various dimensions, and if you convert the migrants to outsiders, you cast the net much wider, and you find it's a nationalism based on exclusion. So from here, there's a very short leap, I think, from a democratic system, quote unquote. I'm not going to the, finer aspects of democracy here, the way Professor Dash was distinguishing between the two facets of democracy. But even if we go by the basic premises, not necessarily democracy as rule of the majority, but obviously rule of the people. If you try to look at democracy like that, obviously democracy in this sense is going to exclude a large chunk of these people. Which people are going to exclude? That's a flexible issue. That's a flexible issue. But when you are trying to define a kind of national identity, and where you're trying to exclude some people, throw some people outside the pale of this identity, obviously there is a clash between nationalism and democracy that comes to the forefront. Thank you.
I'll exercise the prerogative of the chair to say certain things. Yeah. No, I'm not concluding. I have something to say. You see, this question of identity, I'm very intrigued by questions of identity. The entire discussion seems to be between a binary. Are you a Bengali or are you a Bangladeshi? As if a Bangladeshi is not a Bengali. So we have a pre-assumption in this. Now, identities are more than binaries. I am a Bengali. I go into Bihar and when I'm a Bengali, I am a minority. In North India, I'm a minority. In South India, I'm a minority by language. I have a conviction about religion, and that makes me a minority. I was born in a Brahmo family. We are monotheists, and by being monotheists, among polytheists, we are a minority. The minority question is a very dicey question. In South Asia, just to put the cat among the pigeons, this has been a recurrent theme. What we are also forgetting that we have a very rich tradition of multiple identities. There are two brothers, Abu Muhammad and Farid Ayaz, and they trace their ancestry from the Delhi Gharana, and who migrated to Pakistan in 1947 and now are housed in Karachi. They're Qawwals. And these Qawwals, they sing in Bhojpuri, in Maithili, in Urdu, and in Punjabi. And they have a rendition of a song which celebrates Krishna. You can hear it. It says, "O Kanhaiya." And when you hear the first few notes and the first few stanzas as they render it, it's all about adulation of Krishna. And then he stops and he says, "मैं क्या हूँ और क्या हूँ, मैं क्या हूँ और कौन हूँ, किससे पूछो? Whom do you ask about my identity?" And he says, very interesting, he switches codes, and he says, "Rizwan se पूछो." Rizwan is the Saint Peter in Islamic in theology. Rizwan se पूछो. So long as you're hearing about Krishna. In my India, there is a Begum called Begum Parveen Sultana, who sings Tumri and also has the best rendition of Hindu bhajan songs. In Bangladesh, among the many identities, again, Bangladeshis also want to impose an identity, which I think is an elitist imposition. You have Abdul Karim, the Baul, who's also the dawn of the Bauls, who says to anyone who wants to hear that Allah should stay under me. Tumi thako amar odhine, tumi thako amar antore. When you stay inside me, you stay under me. Which is very much a kind of a Protestant relationship or a Brahmo relationship between God and person. And so someone asked him, unfortunately he died, he was, I suppose, one of the most important, influential ethnomusicologists of our times, Kalika Prasad. And Kalika, in an interview he gave to Kalika Prasad, he says, Kalika Prasad asks him, you don't offer namaz, are you into a heretic? And Abdul Karim says, Allah is much bigger than I am. Do you think he has time to sit there up somewhere and look with a microscope and find out who is offering namaz or not? So when we make these kind of a binary impositions, we forget the voices that actually challenge binary impositions, challenge the idea of an identity imposed by elites. And I was just telling Professor Das that the more I hear of Hasina's son's statements emanating from the US, the more I'm convinced that the elite had no understanding of what is happening on the ground in Bangladesh. Elites have a tendency of creating binaries, perhaps because we are too tutored, too knowledgeable to see third dimensions, fourth dimensions. That is, we cannot be anything but one and only that has been assigned to us. And I think that one of the things that recurred in Bangladesh's politics is a struggle with this identity. A struggle with this identity, not only being Bengali and Bangladeshi, but also within them, between being Shariati, between Marfati, between heretics, between people who profess a very different form of Islam, for example, like Abdul Karim Chaudhary. So I think, just as a sociologist, I am an imposter among political scientists, but I thought that I would usurp the moment by, taking the prerogative of the chair to put the cat amongst the pigeon. When we discuss identity, let us not forget that identity is a power imposition given to us by certain textbooks and by certain vested interests. And our fight against those kind of textual constructions of identities, if you want to say so, actually do not take us forward. It only keeps us going back to the same question again and again. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to say one or two things. One thing is that I think 3 days back, there was an attack on a Baul congregation in Bangladesh. In other words, you know that there are forces which are politically invested in homogenizing cultures. And this is one example. And I perfectly agree with Surojit that the call of the hour is to disaggregate, if not deconstruct the identities. About your, there were two issues, I think. One was on authoritarian nationalism. If I ask the question for myself, that is nationalism necessarily authoritarian? Why is it that India did not walk the way Bangladesh did? And I ask myself that there was a strong authoritarian tradition, nationalist tradition even in India. Our teachers, for instance, when they would teach Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, for instance, I remember one of the senior members of West Bengal Political Science Association. He is no longer with us. He left us long back. Once gave me the example that in one of the Congress sessions, in which Gandhi, to which Gandhi addressed. So on seeing Gandhi, the crowd stood up and madly chanted the slogan, Gandhi Baba Hitler ki joy. And he probably wrote it somewhere, I cannot track it. So you know that there has been a dictatorial, authoritarian, fascist tradition. And that has to be kept in mind. I have read, for instance, Bipin Chandra Pal's writings. In fact, before coming here, I wanted to track my small Bengali book of Bipin Chandra Pal. I could not track it from my very poorly organized library. So I could not read it, but the problem was the same, that if you are a nation, then don't argue with me. And the moment you say that we all belong to the nation and you stop arguing with me, that's the death of democracy. So democracy and nationalism do not necessarily work together. They're not born twins, by the way. And maybe that there is parting of ways, and one has to take a very nuanced understanding of it. So nationalism is not necessarily authoritarian, but it can turn authoritarian. Historically, there are evidences. Second question about Bengali identity and Bangladeshi identity, I will give you two examples. In fact, Surajit's teacher, I was telling him, Professor T.N. Madan, has an excellent article on this, which probably is included, which is included in his book, Non-Renunciation. It's a collection of essays, and I strongly urge that all of you read that book, which basically brings out the tension between Bengali identity and Bangladeshi identity. I give you two examples, and please forgive me if I am being anecdotal. The first example is that this was the Dhaka University convocation in 1950, if I am not wrong. And my father was to receive the award in the convocation, award of his postgraduate degree. He did it from Dhaka University, so the mood was very upbeat. And it was the convocation hall where Muhammad Ali Jinnah was to address and was to do the honors. So he was asked to give the convocation address, and he started speaking in Urdu. And the moment he started speaking in Urdu, all the students who had to receive the award, they simply vacated the convocation hall, including my father. So the evacuation of convocation hall happened much earlier than Jadavpur University. This is one example. So this was the time when Urdu was the official language of East Pakistan. The second is in 2008, when I was a visiting professor at the Faculty of Law, they call it Ain Anushad of Dhaka University. I mean, in my class, I used to see lots and lots of women, and burqa-clad women, not even hijab. And those burqas were tent-like burqas. You can only see, you can't see anything. And my eyes, I blame it on myself, my eyes unaccustomed to see this was very difficult. I mean, I can't actually teach anyone whom I can't see. I can't lecture before a dumb computer when online classes were being held. I used to write everything so that I could read it out. That made my task easier. Because when you go to the class, you teach, you see the reactions, responses of the students. You scale up, you scale down, and try to reach the students. But all of them, believe me, were perfectly black. Some of them were in designer burqas. and you can't see anything. When I came back, and the first question I asked my father is this, that was it the same during your time when the girls would come in burqa? He said, not a single one. Not a single one. And then I checked with my Bangladeshi friends that why. And they said that because you know that there has been a heavy quality Islamist, Salafist or Arabic influence there, Wahhabis for instance. So it is because of that. Now why do I cite these two anecdotal examples? Convocation Hall and this one. Now you know that one is an example of Bengali identity when the students evacuated the Convocation Hall, and the second is an example of Bangladeshi identity, that we are not simply Bengalis but we are much more than that. Just one point, which is this, that in Bangladesh there has also been a quest for finding out alternative philological roots of Bengali language. In other words, the idea is not just to speak Bengali, but speak a Bengali which is characteristic of them, which is not used by us. And I happen to have attended one lecture which was delivered by Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay, all of you know. And this was a lecture which was chaired by another very eminent historian, Professor Tapun Rai Choudhury. And it happened in my university, where Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay was trying to find out the Arabic and Persian roots of Bengali language, which in Bangladesh is known as Musalmani Bangla rather than Bengali, which is being spoken by the Hindus, Bengali Hindus. So you know that even if it is the Bengali, the same Bengali is spoken, it's not the Bengali that we speak. Deliberately incorporating words which come from the Perso-Arabic world. And there have been, I didn't know this, but the origins of this actually happened in late 19th century. That was what Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay was talking about. Much in the same way as, for instance, Hindi is being Sanskritized. And you know that the Arabic Persian words are increasingly being discarded. In North Indian stations, for instance, in my childhood, I would see Pine ka pani. But now you see Peo Jal, which is no longer Pine ka pani. So these changes are increasingly happening. Thank you.
Thank you to all the distinguished panelists for their impressive and enriching answers to the questions that were raised. Now I'll just request one thing from the panelists, that there is a news portal of SNU, that is SNU Chronicle, and a team has come from SNU Chronicle just to take an interview, a few minutes of our panelists, followed by an interview of Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay. So I'll just request the team from SNU Chronicle to go ahead and ask their questions, and after that we will move on to the certificate distribution session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we come to the close of this dynamic academic event, I'm really honored to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Political Science. At the very beginning, I would like to convey my thanks to the West Bengal Political Science Association, especially the President, Professor Bimal Shankar Nando, and the General Secretary, Professor Apurba Mohan Mukhopadhyay, for agreeing to collaborate with us. The necessary guidance and support provided by the association at all stages has helped us smoothly organize the event. A special thanks to the esteemed panelists, Professor Samir Kumar Das, Professor Partha Pratim Basu, and Dr. Siddhartha Dasgupta for taking out time from their very busy and hectic schedules and gracing our event. It is needless to say that their erudite reflections on the present crisis in Bangladesh have enriched our understanding about it and instilled in us a reflective spirit. And this actually reminds me of the concluding chapter of the widely read book called Calcutta Diary by Professor, also Administrator Ashok Mitro. And the last chapter in his book, which was titled One Revolution Enough? While this book was published many years ago, nonetheless, the last chapter of Professor Mitro's book kind of rings true even today. At the end, I must extend a sincere thanks to the administration at SNU, special mention to the Honourable Vice-Chancellor of SNU, Professor Dhrubajyoti Chattopadhyay, for his never-ending encouragement, the Registrar, and the Dean of the School of Social Sciences for providing leadership to the school and inspiring us in every step of the way. Thanks to Mr. Shomo Shah, the current head of the department, along with other faculty members, including Mr. Debokorsho Datta and Dr. Konkona Debnath, for shouldering important responsibilities and leading the way, without which this program would not have seen the light of day. My thanks to the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication for their help with capturing important moments from the event. And finally, thanks to all the student volunteers for your enthusiasm, behind-the-scenes efforts that have ensured the smooth running of today's program. We deeply appreciate your hard work. Thank you, everyone. Safe travels and have a wonderful evening ahead. Please pardon me, as I've forgotten to mention Professor Sibtosh Bandyopadhyay for choosing to launch his book with us. Thank you, Professor Bandyopadhyay, for coming to SNU and sharing your work with us. And thank you, Shomo, for reminding me.
Thank you, Professor Chakraborty, for the vote of thanks. We will now move on to the certificate distribution ceremony. So I'd be calling the names of the students who had registered, the students and also other participants who had registered. So kindly just come up to the stage and gather your certificates from our esteemed panelists and dignitaries. Thank you. So first is Sunidhi Rawat from the Department of Political Science. Lisa, you go there. So I'll request the panelists to kindly give the certificates to our participants. Sunidhi, please come up to the dais. Yeah, go there. अच्छा सामने चलो हाँ better. हाँ हाँ सर सामने चलो हाँ हाँ আমি তো নাম So first is Sunidhi Rawat. Next is Titisha Ghosh. Please come up. Titisha Ghosh. Professor Basu, please. Yes. Next is Neha Topo. After that, Nibir Chakma. After that, there is Sabia Parveen. Next is Shupradip Noshkar. Next is Dipanita Sharkar. After that, there is Soham Saha. Yeah, others please. After that, there is Fiona Sarkar. Next, Rajarshi Mondol. After that, there is Srija Sadhu. After Srija, there is Ankita Tibriwala. Next is Rajrupa Banerjee. Then there is Preeti Jaiswal. After that, there is Laksh Sonthalia. Next is Indu Kumari Paswan. Sorry. Next is Onubha Roy. After that, there is Shrishti Shaw. Onubha Roy and Shrishti Shaw. Okay, they are not here. Next is Sulagna Sinha. Then there is Ahana Bhattacharya. Next is Debraj. After that, there is Astha Anand. Next is Debaroti Shaha. After that, there is Nahid Parveen. So, are there any students left? I don't think you have registered. Is there any student who has not gotten the certificate? Kindly just raise your hand if there is. Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding, sir. Professor Mukul Haldar. Oh, acha, Mukul Hal. Sorry. So if there is anyone else left who has not gotten the certificate, yes, madam, kindly, please, kindly come. Come, sir. Oh, yeah, sir, I think you were also missed. So kindly, please, sir. Arnav Banerjee, okay. I don't think there is anyone else left, so we will be ending with the certificate distribution ceremony. So, thank you very much to all the panelists again for coming here and making this session a success. And we will exit from here. So, thank you to all the participants and the students who came for this program. We shall meet again for the next event that we organize. Thank you.